Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Licensing Committee. I'm Councillor Claire Udy, your Chair of Licensing. I would like to draw you to the following information before we start the meeting. Housekeeping. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at the Queen Victoria statue in the front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should remember to sign out when leaving the building after today's meeting. Also, we are live streaming the meeting today from a camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and the recording will be on the council's website. The camera will mainly capture the backs of people making deputations, but there will be some footage of them as they approach and leave the table where the microphones are located, and anyone leaving or entering the room while the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. And can everyone use their microphones when they're talking? Thank you. So good afternoon and welcome today to our policy meeting. Before we do any introductions, I'd like to have any apologies for absence, please.
Carrie, you go first. I don't know what you're going to say.
Councillors Steve Pitt, John Ferret and Benedict Swan.
I've been informed by Councillor New that he cannot attend.
Thank you.
And also Councillor Vizakli is unable to attend.
Thank you. Any declaration of members in...
Sorry, another one. Dave Ashmore, sorry, half-term childcare.
You did tell me to say. All done. Any declarations of members' interest at all? I have a slight declaration to make. Noted in the report today is someone who's come from GMB, well not come, who's written in from GMB Taxis in Brighton. It just needs to be known that I'm a member of the GMB union and it doesn't affect me in any way from the evidence from the report. I didn't even know they had a taxis subsection until they'd written in at all. I guess we're going to have another one from GMB.
Yeah,
hello.
Chair, I'm also a member of GMB.
Thanks. Thank you for that. Before introductions, can we go through the minutes of the previous meeting on the 25th of October 19 as a record, please? Page 1, page 2, and page 3.
Object, Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, it says quite clearly at the conclusion of the meeting it was asked when a report be brought forward on taxi ranks.
Yeah.
And it states it will be at this meeting. And the meeting is forthcoming and we have no report on taxi ranks. This has been going on for 18 months now and we've got a lot of drivers upset. Where's the report?
Take it to Nick.
Due to the election that none of us predicted in December, there was a delay in terms of getting various site visits arranged with the trade. That has now taken place. Rossley has been out with Viv Young. He's also been out with the Senior Transport Manager with Traffic and Transportation, Paul Darlow, and the report is in preparation for you at the next meeting.
With the greatest respect to the licensing manager, I believe those visits were 6 weeks ago, and now we're getting a report at the next licensing meeting, which will probably be after this next set of elections. So with the greatest respect, this has taken, probably in the grand scheme of things, it's going to take nearly 2 years for us to get to basically taxi ranks. It's just not good enough.
Councillor Katz-Peter, I recognise your concern, and obviously I will take back an urgent instruction for my team to get that report to you without further undue delay.
I have to admit, I know it's not just your department, you have to liaise with various other departments within the council, but the fact that it's 2 years along the line, and I went back through my emails last night from various taxi drivers who are discussing this, and they do go back to 2017 on some of them, so it's taken quite a delay.
Again, Councillor, I take on board your concerns and I will go back to my team and ensure that report comes to you without any more delay.
Thank you. Can we take the record? Yeah. Hello, Colonel. Done it. That's
Gerald.
it. Right.
Gerald works. Chair, can I suggest that to make sure that this doesn't get delayed any further, that we resolve we will have a meeting in March to make sure that we get that cleared down. So can we make sure that that then happens? So it's before PERDA, so we can get this sorted and get it out of the way. And we then don't have the delay of people saying we can't do it because of an election. So can we make sure there's a meeting in March to clear this down?
Members, can I suggest as an alternative for your, bearing in mind the haste that you want this to go ahead, if there were agreed taxi ranks between the trade and the Transport Authority, would members have any objection to that matter going forward on MIS to speed things up?
Yeah,
So I would have objection, it needs to be here.
So I'd like to restate my thing. We need a written report to a meeting of this committee in March, because this has been doing the rounds for a long time. So is that doable?
Members, I'll make sure it's doable.
Thank you.
Just bang your cup. Right.
It's March 2020.
I've put that date on my report.
And preferably before PERDA.
It would have to be before PERDA.
When's PERDA? 31st of March?
Yeah.
I'm writing that there so I remember. Thank you. So, apart from that, which will be added in, everyone okay with the minutes? Formally seconded, all of that. Thank you very much. Okay, we can go round number 4 for operator and council signage on licensed vehicles. Thank you. I can sign that now. I'll go around the table and do introductions. As far as I know, today on agenda item number 4, I have 6 speakers down to speak. I have Mr. Bruce Hall, I have Mr. Miguel Alain Coltier, is it? Sorry if I got it wrong. Hello. Peter Sutherland, Viv Young and Chris Dixon. I have nothing else. All 5 of you are in attendance. And also Councillor Luke Stubbs. Due to time limits on speaking, and we had to consult standing orders, apparently there's nothing for licensing, so we adopt the council's formal standing orders. It will be 12 minutes for and 12, well, it's normally 6 minutes, but if there are multiple speakers, it gets limited down to 12 minutes for and 12 minutes against. I would ask people that are speaking against the recommendations, would you all like 3 minutes each, or would you like to maybe do 2 at 6 minutes, or I don't know if you wanted to go over the same points. You can have a couple of minutes to decide on that, or if you'd all like 3 minutes each, that's...
Can we ask a show of how many people are speaking for and against?
It's 1 for and 4 against.
12 minutes, is it?
12 minutes in total for against and for, so, and it's 6 minutes for Councillor Stubbs. Yes, Miss Councillor Vernon Jackson.
I expect people have come here having written out something they've prepared for a 6-minute thing. I wonder if we could show a little flexibility to allow
I am more than
people
happy
6
to do
minutes
that, but
each
please
as
do
they
not
had
try and
expected.
repeat your points if that's okay.
If that's
Thank
all right,
you.
Chair.
And Councillor Stubbs, you have 6 minutes. And you will speak after everyone else has spoken, apparently, Councillor Stubbs. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Councillor Claire Udy and I'm Chair of Licence, and I'll go to my left.
My name's Ben Attrell. I'm a solicitor employed by the council and I'll be advising the committee today.
Councillor Scott Playter-Harris, I'm the Vice Chair of the committee.
Councillor Lee Mason, Cosham Ward.
Councillor Linda Symes, Eastern and Greenswater. Councillor Hannah Hockaday, Cosham Ward.
Councillor Gerald Vernon Jackson, Milton Ward.
Councillor George Fielding, Central South Sea Ward.
Councillor Tom Coles, Fratton Ward.
Bruce Hall, General Manager, Aquacars.
Director of Aquacars. Chris Dixon, Hackney Carriage Trade Rep.
Viv Young, Hackney Carriage Trade Rep.
Peter Sutherland, Uber Trade Rep.
Miguel Alain Coltier, Private Hire and Associate.
Luke Stubbs, Councillor in Eastern Greenswater.
Councillor Leo Madden, Nelton Ward.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Nikki Humphreys, Licensing Manager.
For the record, Mr. Sutherland, are you an Uber driver or an Uber trade rep, just for the record? Okay. Right then, we'll move over to Ms. Nikki Humphreys to give the report on today's operator and council signage on licensed vehicles. We'll then have the representations and deputations, and then Councillor Luke Stubbs, and then the discussion will be open to members for questions, and then we can go from there, basically. So, Nikki, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members. The purpose of this report, as you can tell, is that they consider the concerns that have been raised at a previous Hackney Carriage private hire consultative group meeting, which was held in October last year in respect of your current policy for operator and council signage on licensed vehicles. Paragraph 2 of your report sets out the recommendations for you to consider following due regard to the comments made. Those recommendations, in summary, are to note the comments of the trade and the contents of the report, and to make no amendments to your current policy in relation to signage on licensed vehicles. The reasons for these recommendations are fully explained in paragraph 4 of this report on page 22, but I will obviously refer to those sections in greater detail as part of my introduction to the report today. Paragraph 3 of your report sets out the background as to why this report is before you today. And in summary, certain trade representatives believe that the requirements for the operator signage to be permanent and not magnetic hinders the working practices where some drivers want to work for more than one operator at any one time, and they have formed the view that PCC is in breach of the law by restricting free trade. In addition, you have also received representations regarding concerns of damage being caused to vehicles, and this is aggravated by any signage on PCC licensed vehicles. These representations are attached as Appendix A to your report, which is on page 25 of the bundle. At this point, I obviously want to point out to you that the views put forward as part of these appendices are not representative of all of the private hire and Hackney carriage trade in Portsmouth. Aquacars here are present here as a deputation, and they have advised that they do not agree with the views that have been put forward at Appendix A, and totally support the policy that you are currently enforcing. As you're aware, Aqua are a major private operator in Portsmouth and have at least 700 vehicles and associated drivers operating in Portsmouth. The GMB Union have also made representations to you today regarding the issue of livery. That representation is on Appendix B, page 27 of your papers. Concerns have been expressed about the removal of livery and its negative effects in terms of cross-border hiring, which you will be familiar with having regard to the concerns raised previously by the trade itself. Paragraph 3.5 of your report sets out the legislative framework for the signage on licensed vehicles, and that's on page 8 of your report. In summary, the legislation expressly requires that licensed private hire and Hackney carriage vehicles must be clearly identified as such, and to distinguish between the two types, i.e. Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles. On page 9, paragraph 3.6 of your report, I have set out your current policy requirements under the vehicle licence conditions and also the private hire operator conditions. They are quite lengthy, and I appreciate if you want any clarification later, I'm more than happy to do so. But in essence, there is no mandatory requirement for the display of operator livery on vehicles. This is a matter for the operator who may or may not want to display company advertising. The stipulation, however, of Portsmouth City Council's licensing authority is that if company operator signage is used, then it must not be magnetic, so it must be permanently affixed to the vehicle. In addition, PCC livery, which if you're familiar with licensed vehicles, it is the sign on the rear door, passenger doors of the vehicle that say it is a licensed private hire vehicle by Portsmouth, and that those vehicles can only be pre-booked only. That's in terms of private hire vehicles. In considering the validity, relevance, evidential basis and proportion I can't even say, don't even know whether this is a word, member, so apologies, proportionateness or proportionality, thank you, of the current policy. The report does provide to you further evidence to support the continued use of livery on licensed vehicles. And this is set out from paragraph 3.7 onwards of the report, and that starts on page 10. And if I just quickly run through those for you. The current best practice guidelines that have been issued to licensing authorities by the DFT, Department for Transport, specify reference to vehicle identification. And their advice is that signs on vehicles showing the operator, the licensing authority, and reference to a private hire vehicle being pre-booked is the best approach for a licensing authority in order to identify licensed vehicles. Reference is also made to the draft statutory guidance currently being prepared by the government, and which, when in place, will have a statutory footing, and that actually would require that the licensing authority must have regard to its guidance when making policy decisions, and if they depart from that guidance, the authority must give clear reasons for that departure. And again, that draft guidance talks about signage and making passengers aware of the difference between private hire and hackney carriage vehicles, and indeed private vehicles themselves. You will note that in terms of the purpose of the guidance and for policy is to protect the public. The importance of ensuring that the licensing regime protects the vulnerable cannot be overestimated. There is also reference in the report at paragraph 3.10 to a publication, James Button, on taxis, licensing law and practice. I have set out Mr. Button's credentials within that report, and I don't intend to repeat that for you, but I thought it may be helpful for you to be aware of the solicitor's view and in his role as president of the Institute of Licensing. And I will just pick out particular reference that you may find helpful. It recognises that there has been debate over the way in which signs are attached to the vehicle. They can either be adhesive and fixed permanently to the vehicle, or magnetic and be capable of being removed. The magnetic ones are claimed to damage the paintwork, can leave marks on cars, but the ease of, and this is the relevant matter for you members, the ease of removal of magnetic signs leaves them vulnerable to theft and also to use on unlicensed vehicles. As a private hire vehicle is always a private hire vehicle, and that the plates should never be removed whilst the vehicle is licensed, the same applies to the additional signs. This certainly appears to be a compelling argument in favour of the permanently attached adhesive versions. I've also referred members you to a Crown Court appeal in paragraph 3.11 of this report, and this appeal was directly in relation to magnetic signage on licensed vehicles. I would draw the committee's attention to the comments of the judge when dismissing the appeal by the private hire vehicle operators who appealed to the Crown Court. The appellant court said that whilst they were sympathetic to the appellant's personal difficulties and inconveniences that they said they had suffered, and this did include vandalism to vehicles, when those were weighed against the important considerations of public safety and proper monitoring of private hire vehicles generally by the council, they found that it was reasonably necessary to insist upon permanent display of signage by way of permanently affixed vinyl signs. This case is a very important consideration for you, as the circumstances considered by the Crown Court are almost parallel to the trade arguments in front of you today. And on that basis, the court came down firmly in favour of public safety and proper monitoring of licensed vehicles. Page 13, paragraph 3.2 of your report, we have addressed the issue put forward by the trades that your current policy is a restriction and contrary to advice given by the Competition and Markets Authority. This organisation, if I call it the CMA, has a statutory duty to promote competition for the benefit of consumers. But they make it clear that conditions on taxi and private hire licences play a crucial role in ensuring the safety of passengers. They have produced guidelines and 4 tests to help you, as policymakers, assess whether your policy will limit competition. And those are on page 13, members, and they are: will the measure directly or indirectly limit the number or range of suppliers? Will the measure limit the ability of suppliers to compete? Will the measure limit suppliers' incentives to compete? Or will the measure limit the choices and information available to the consumer? The views on this argument are obviously contained within that report for you on page 14, and these have been agreed by the Council's legal advisor. In summary, the Council is of the view that your livery policy does not limit competition and does not have a negative impact on consumers. Signage on licensed vehicles is important to those persons who use their services and have the reassurance that the vehicle is properly licensed. Page 15 sets out the views of Portsmouth Police, and they're quite straightforward. I don't intend to go into any more depth than this is the views put forward by Portsmouth Police in relation to unreported crime, in relation to vehicle damage, and that the use of livery supports public safety and safeguarding in this city. You've also available crime statistics on page 11 onwards, and also the reasons for the recommendations I have summarised on page 22. If I can just do those for you, and then I will finish speaking, as I'm sure you'll all be pleased. So the reasons for why we're asking you to retain your policy, so we're not asking you to amend it, we are just asking you to keep the policy as it is that the governing legislation and case law says that licensed vehicles should be clearly identified as such, and in such a way that they are distinguishable between taxis, private hire vehicles, and as well as private vehicles. Current best practice, which you have regard to in your policy, and that is issued by the Department for Transport, indicates that additional clearer form of identification on vehicles is best practice and is seen as best practice nationally. Your primary and overriding objective is to protect the public, and the use of council and company livery clearly identifies that the vehicle is licensed by this authority, and it therefore provides reassurance and protection to members of the public using licensed vehicles and other road users within the city and other areas. The crime statistics have evidenced a 39% reduction in vehicle crime in Portsmouth as of September 2019, and there is no evidence to suggest that removal of livery will prevent the vehicle crime. The views expressed by Uber driver representatives are not necessarily reflective of all the licensed trade in Portsmouth. The ease and removal of magnetic signage will leave them vulnerable to theft and also to use on unlicensed vehicles. Our previous experience of issuing magnetic signs brought about incidents of theft, and signs were easily dislodged from vehicles. So you have taken the magnetic approach before, you have amended your policy in recognition of the problems that were associated with magnetic signage. Removal of all the livery associated with a licensed vehicle would exacerbate problems with vehicles working outside of the city and indeed within the city. Customers would no longer be able to identify clearly that they are Portsmouth licensed vehicles, which will undoubtedly impact on the most vulnerable passengers and public reassurance of standards for vehicles in Portsmouth. And you also have substantial evidence from other licensing authorities, as your appendices D and E, that suggests that livery is a key safety measure adopted on a national basis. Whilst the formal proposal, members, is to say to you that you should retain the policy, and there is an evidence basis for justifying that, if there is any compromise that the members would want to consider, then a suggestion is that we can reword the vehicle licensing conditions so that operator livery that is displayed on the vehicle will be permanently fixed for the main operator. But if proprietors undertake bookings with other operators, secondary bookings through apps, then they will have the benefit of putting magnetic signage just to show the alternative operator. So magnetic in no circumstances could be allowed by the licensing committee. You also have an integrated impact assessment for consideration as part of this report, and that is Appendix E. In undertaking that assessment, there is a view that my view is the current policy, if it remains as existed or amended in accordance with the advice I've just given, then there would be no detrimental impact on that assessment. However, if you wish to remove all conditions relating to the display of operator and council livery, then this will likely have a negative impact on crime and disorder, as well as regeneration, culture and the environment, and that is set out in the impact assessment for you. And on that basis, if you change the policy completely or remove it completely, you will have to consider and address those elements of the impact assessment in any decision that you make this afternoon. Members, I apologise for taking up so much of your time in presenting the report, but as far as I'm concerned as your reporting officer, this matter is of huge public safety and safeguarding relevance and importance, and I felt it was appropriate for me to take you through that report in the comprehensive way I did, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms Humphrey. First of all, I'd like to just go down the order of the thing. Mr Hall, would you like to have your 6 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm a little bit bemused, really, because Portsmouth City Council Licensing Department were, in my eyes, we've always had a very good relationship with them. I've never always agreed with what they did, but when it came to safety, Portsmouth City Council Licensing were always at the head of the game. Whether it came from putting silver cars on to make sure the public knew which were Hackneys, and putting stickers on the side of cars with pre-booked only on the side of private hire to distinguish between the two. Now, the problem with removing all stickers is quite, in my eyes, is a ridiculous thing to do. Number one, okay, we have a lot, as a company, of school runs where we pick up vulnerable children. You will have an unmarked vehicle going into a school with just a plate the size of 10 by 10 on the back of the car to determine that it's a private hire vehicle. Is this going to be acceptable for the teacher looking out the window or the pupil who's getting in the car? We all know what's happened around the UK. We are all striving for safety. This can only be a backward step if we take the stickers off these cars. You will hear that people are saying that there's damage on vehicles around the town because of stickers. Sorry, I think that's a red herring. You have damage on vehicles in vans with signage on, without signage on. They still get robbed, they still get damaged, they still get their windows put through. If you leave your phone, your laptop or anything else on the seats of vehicles, they will smash them, no matter whether it's a taxi or not. the law on a private hire vehicle, it states, fact, once a private hire, always a private hire, which means you will hear the reasoning for people using their cars privately. The law actually states it's a private hire vehicle, wherever it goes, whatever time of day it is, okay, whoever is driving it. Okay, you should have private hire stickers on that vehicle. People of Portsmouth should know what vehicles they are getting into. With the 2010 Deregulation Act, where you get cross-border hiring and that lot, it is becoming more and more increasingly hard to determine what vehicles are working in Portsmouth. Enforcement don't know what cars are from where. They know if they're Portsmouth because they have our plates on the back. They have our livery on the front. They can turn around, I had the police phone up countless times. One of your cars, they know it's my car because they can see the signage. They know it's our car because they can see the great big plate number on the side of the car. People getting into vehicles do not walk to the back of a car to say, oh, is this a taxi? I'll have a look at the little plate. They look and carry on at the side of the vehicle. They know what they're getting into. If you stop this, you're going to open such a big can of worms, it's unbelievable. You might as well scrap the colouring for hackneys. You might as well scrap all the laws that you're getting at the moment, because this is a race to the bottom. And by the way, there are other councils I am fully aware of who are looking at what decision you make before they make a decision in their areas as well. Because they know this is a political hot potato and someone needs to make a stance. And I think it's Portsmouth City Council. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Is it Mr. Dixon? Hello, thanks.
Hi, Chris Dixon. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'll go to Nikki's presentation, and she's made some very good points. But we're here from the hackney trade. We're more concerned about what Bruce says is a red herring that we don't feel it is, and that's damage to vehicles. That's what we're talking about today, and try and find a solution towards reducing that. The fact your crime figures are indicating that numbers are down since 2019, I would respectfully suggest that the drivers are not reporting this because they can't go in for a windscreen claim if it's a theft. So, and at the end of the day, if they report a crime, they've got to pay for they'll lose out with the insurance wise and things like that. We're more concerned about when the driver takes the car home, that he just wants to be able to take the signage down. Now, I hear Nikki's point that if signage is magnetic, my wife could nick the sign off my car and make herself a taxi and go out and do a few jobs on the side. We have a simple solution on that. It's in the council's hand. You put the registration number on the livery. You just put it on the livery, it's there. It applies only to the car with that number plate. So what I'm trying to say to you is it is doable. Whereas Nikki is suggesting that it's not doable. They just want to de-taxi or de-private hire when they're not working. As terms and conditions of the licence could be that it must show livery when it's driven. It must do. And if it shows livery when it was driven, they can't go up to Gatwick Airport and things like that and do a bit of moonlighting and what have you with the stickers down, because it's a taxi. So really what I'm trying to say is the solution is still in your hands, and it's a two-way thing. It's giving a little bit back to the drivers that are getting robbed, but you're still retaining control by way of signage with the vehicle registration on and the plate number. I don't see that should be an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Young?
Thank you. I was going to speak basically against the livery, but hearing the compelling evidence from Nikki, and sadly, I represent the taxi trade, the hackney carriages. Not one is here from the hackney carriage, is there? They're the ones who's getting their cars battered, broken windows, broken windscreens, etc., they haven't come here. I'm quite happy. My car's in a garage, safe and sound at home. I would like to say, your bonnet livery, please think about that on Hackney carriages. You know, when they come here, you tell them to change the livery is faded. It takes an hour to get that off the bonnet. Hot air, boiling water, glue remover.
Magnetic.
You know, magnetic ones won't work because they blow off. But just have a think about your bonnet stickers. Chris has probably said a lot of what I'd written down. With reference livery on vehicles, I mean, it's a bit ironic. 2 emails on, you know, somebody who's unfortunate enough to have to put up with my emails. The ones I sent Monday night, for example, lost property from license I received from Jason in licensing. One was for a purse, one was for a wallet. Neither of the customers could describe the driver or the car. These vehicles each had 5 signs identifying them, if indeed they were Pompey Hackney carriages, because the public wouldn't have a clue. The licence plate on the back, number 1. 2 and 3, external on the rear doors with Hackney carriage licence number. Number 4 on the dashboard. Number 5, the Hackney carriage licence on the windscreen visible from the outside. And from 1st of May, these will have an extra sticker in the rear near side window. Maybe we should have more identifying marks, front and rear wings, and one for luck on the boot. I can assure you the above mentioned who had lost property will still not be able to recognise a said vehicle. I don't personally have a problem with livery, but it's the ongoing damage that's a problem. My car is safe in the garage. When a driver puts a car on, he expects to keep usually ballpark figure about 5 years. He doesn't expect to be told to change his livery after sometimes as short a period as a year due to its fading. We pay for them. Can the council please make sure they are fit for purpose and last a little bit longer? As a licensing authority, you have a duty of care. Surely this would include the people you licence. With our vehicles being continually battered, then not much care being shown by the council. Back in the news 28th of October, it was highlighted about the damage to taxis and hire cars in Pompey. The trade believed that the vehicle livery was the main reason. A spokeswoman for PCC said, for PCC, I'm assuming this is you, Nicky, the issue has been raised with us and we are working with taxi drivers and looking at options to minimise the number of incidents. After I finish speaking, Nicky, can you please let myself and the committee know what work has been going on to minimise this? Yeah, so basically I'm changing my stance. You've got compelling evidence, you need livery, you need it for the safety of the public, identification.
Take it off at night.
Chris is saying take it off at night. I understand your views and I understand exactly what will happen. If a driver hasn't got one at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, I'm sorry, he won't go home, he will carry on working. And that's obviously not what the council wants and it's not safe for the public. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Young. Mr Sutherland?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing us to speak today. This matter came before the committee as a result of discussions that have been ongoing for almost a year between myself and colleagues and the licensing manager. They culminated in the submission put forward in writing on the 5th of December as requested by Councillor Vernon Jackson at the last consultative group meeting. At that meeting, it was agreed that there would be a follow-up workshop or further consultative group meeting to discuss the submission and the Council's response. It was our understanding that there would be further dialogue to hopefully clarify and resolve issues raised by us prior to it coming to a full Council meeting. Clearly our understanding. Such a meeting never took place despite my having received an assurance from the Chair in writing and the fact that Councillor Vernon Jackson also confirmed the intention of such a meeting in an email to Penny Morton MP. When I pressed the matter with the licensing manager, I was advised that no further meeting would be held as she felt, and I quote, a further consultative group meeting will exasperate all parties. I don't know what parties she's referring to, but that was the comment. This is distinctly not what we were told would happen, and I find it, to be honest, disrespectful at best. We'd always hoped to discuss and resolve these matters in a constructive manner and in partnership with licensing, rather than taking a confrontational stand. The fact remains that operators were given to understand that operator livery was a mandatory requirement, and that this was clearly obvious in our impression when we first met to discuss the matter with the licensing manager almost a year ago. In fact, it was during that meeting when we were putting forward our arguments for the removal of operator livery, in which case we also stressed that removal should be optional to satisfy the likes of my colleague to my right, who wish to retain operator livery for their own reasons, i.e. marketing, which I fully understand, and safety as a catch-all, I suppose, but it was always our intention that such livery should be optional and we should be allowed to remove it. And during that meeting, we were stopped in mid-flow. In fact, my colleague to my left was talking when the licensing manager put a hand up and said, "You're knocking on an open door." Now, in our ignorance, we took that to mean that the licensing department were receptive and open to discussions on the subject, when in fact the correct response from the licensing manager I put to you should have been, operator livery was not and never had been a mandatory requirement of this council. That fact only came to light, as far as I was concerned, at the last consultative group meeting in October, and that was a big surprise to some of us, including Uber. And by Uber, I don't refer to myself as a driver, I mean Uber the company. The Uber manager was here, and she was shocked. So now licensing wished to change the wording, but not the policy, to enforce mandatory operator livery. I do stress, livery should be, in our thoughts, optional. We reserve the right to trade, and we object to any restraint of our right to trade. If others wish to maintain livery, that is up to them. But the catch-all of public safety, when there are 8 pieces of signage on a private hire vehicle in this city, unless it's an Uber, in which case most of us have taken our operator livery off, still leaves 6 pieces of signage on there. And I think what this committee needs to take on board is that most, if not all, operators these days are app-based. When people look for my car, they look for my number plate. They don't look for the name of the operator on the side of it. They have my registration, my photograph, they have that information. I refer you, if I may, then, to the report that was put forward by licensing. The police was an issue that was mentioned by my colleague to my right from Aquacars, Bruce, and he highlighted that. And I just refer you to an article in the news that an Aqua boss says cab drivers in Portsmouth are being targeted by throwing vandals every week and drivers feel under attack. In the news, it wasn't Bruce, it was taxi driver Brian Bucknell, I believe. Is that correct? That was the front page of the news. Cars were being attacked. This was the 15th of May 2018. So it does prove the case that vehicles are being attacked. And these vehicles would not, I put it to you, have been attacked had there not been signage on them. They weren't attacking unmarked cars. Going back to your report, there's a page and a half in there from the GMB, which is totally irrelevant, input from somebody that's not even in any way involved in this situation. And I may just as well have come here with deputations from the National Institute of Farmers and the Institute of Hairdressers. Frankly, it's laughable, and I put it to you, should be dismissed. It is totally irrelevant. As for the piece put in there by licensing as regarding other authorities, might I point out to you, if you haven't already noticed, the licensing canvassed the views of 340 authorities. 277 responded, 37 responses are
Could you
shown.
sum up, please? Thank you.
Thank you. And of those that were shown, TfL was included, and TfL doesn't even have licensing or plates on their vehicles. We'd like to know where the other 240 was, and we'd like to know why there were no comments from neighbouring authorities that don't require such livery. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Mr. Coltier, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I want to make a reference to the restraint of trade, and the reason why I'm making today a deputation is to bring to your attention that the current recommendations for permanent signage will facilitate the market share practice, which is a prohibited practice under the Competition Act 1998. A market share practice is often employed by cartels to distort competition and trade in their respective markets, and as such, the practice is prohibited. In our case, we are being denied the right to trade freely as sole traders and sell our services across multiple platforms and operators by the enforcement of signage on our vehicles in permanent form. Such requirements that would amount to this effect would be void by the competition law if they would be imposed on us by the undertakings, by the operators. However, the local council does not act as an undertaking in this scheme, but acts as a regulator of the market. As such, the prohibitions are virtually impossible to enforce. Whether there is an intent to facilitate this or not, the effect is clearly visible and easy to demonstrate. Therefore, given that the effect is now brought to your attention, your decision to uphold this recommendation and policy made in the report would mean that you're actively supporting such practice and nullify the purpose of the Competition Act. It will be a clear demonstration of protectionism towards existing operators in manners employed by cartels in the detriment of the sole trading drivers in your constituency. It will also send a message to any other potential operator that wishes to enter the market that Portsmouth is not open and welcome to trade and business. This can have a severe impact on the reputation of the council and the credibility of the licensing service. I urge you to consider our reasons and recommendations, as the magnetic signage would provide an adequate way to protect the public, and at the same time it would not distort the competition and trade, and it would not deny the rights and freedoms of your constituents that are driving private hire vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you. I can fully understand why we've got the licensing policy that we have and how it's come around, and perhaps at the time that it was drawn up it may very well have been the right policy, but of course the world moves on, things change, and we live in an age now with a massive presence of online and mobile phones, and we also live in an increasingly deregulated country. So we have a situation where an awful lot of, you now get genuine part-time drivers, you may have another job or whatever, and you do some driving in your own vehicle for some of the time. We have a situation whereby if you order a taxi, you do get the number plate sent to you. I certainly use that. I mean, I've never even ordered an Uber, but I frequently use Aqua, and you get the number plate for that, and that is what I use to identify the vehicle. We also have a cross-border situation now. For a long time now, for nearly a decade, it's been perfectly okay to register your vehicle in any licensing authority area subject to its rules, and to trade across the country. Now, you might have a view, you can agree with that or not agree with that, but that is the policy of the government, and it is the law, and it is the framework that we operate in. And if Portsmouth pushes too hard, you'll just see the number of vehicles registered in Portsmouth drop, and the number of vehicles registered in Havant and Gosport and places like that rise. Now, does that really do anyone any good? I would argue that it doesn't, and so this council needs to respond to the pressure from drivers about the things they think they need in order to make Portsmouth the authority they would prefer to register their vehicle in, because they have other options, and we are risking a situation whereby fairly large numbers of vehicles move. I mean, you've got other regulations as well to do with the age of vehicles and so forth, which I can see why I could imagine myself, if I was in that situation, I would perhaps consider alternatives as well. I was going back to something which Mr. Sutherland finished on, but I think it's a really key point, which is the representations, because listening to Nikki, and the pitch of it, that it will be a fringe position, a real outlier, not to have the policies that we have. It will be Portsmouth Council is one of the most deregulated liberal licensing regimes in the country. That is not borne out by the table on page 34. And the table on page 34, actually, many of these requirements are only applicable to a minority of councils, and you have various figures there, but 34%, 23%, 36%, 38%. I mean, these are, it's not 90% that have these rules, it's very large numbers of councils don't, and they seemingly think that that is a manageable situation, and it doesn't give rise to excessive risks to passengers. So how can they make this work and we can't? I think you really need to be responsive to what drivers want, that damage to vehicles is a serious problem, and it's something that we all have to work together to address. And yes, it is courses. Police have a big role in this, but we also need to do what we can to manage down the risk of crime, to manage down certain vehicles being marked as more vulnerable than others. And so I urge you as an authority to take account of the representations made by the trade representatives here, who are not just speaking on their own behalf, but are speaking for drivers more widely. And they brought to you problems which the driving community is facing. They brought these to you asking for a solution, and not just to say, well, it's not a problem, well, let's just forget about it and move on. So please do something today, and please do something to move this situation on.
Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. Might I ask that maybe next you consider joining the licensing committee and make those concerns conveyed to us? Thanks. I was just going to ask before questions if our group, if Nikki can just address some concerns that came up through the reps and deputations, and then we'll go straight to questions. Is that all right? And then we'll go to you first. Thanks.
Members, I know there were a number of questions posed to me by Councillor, by Viv Young, by Peter Solid. I mean, I'm happy to address them outside of this committee room unless members actually want any clarification from me in relation to matters. But if members want to raise them with me, I'm happy to address them.
I think it's an email will suffice.
Yeah, absolutely. If there are issues, I'm happy to address them on an individual basis with the trade reps, particularly in relation to the bonnet livery.
Thank you. I'll open up the floor to members' questions. I have Councillor Peter Harris, Councillor Vernon Jackson. Did you have your hand up, Tom? No? Who else did? No? Just you two?
Chair, I want to, firstly, before I go into questions, I want to just propose a slight amendment to the papers today, and it's starting at 3.6. If you go to 3.6 and you go to Hackney Carriage Vehicle Licence Condition, and you go down to 2, it's literally the third paragraph from the bottom. It says the third paragraph in the italic. So the local mandatory, it says permanent and not magnetic. Can we remove and not magnetic and put or magnetic? Next page. Oh, sorry. It's both, Gerald. The second paragraph and the third paragraph in italics. So you've got permanent and not magnetic, remove that and just put or. Then if you go to the third bullet point, it's local mandatory permanent, remove and not and put or magnetic.
No. Hang on, can we?
All right, do you want me to go through it again? I'll start again.
I mean, I think the reference you're making, I think you're saying that all corporate livery, so the council's livery is magnetic.
Let me start again, please, Nikki.
Yeah, thank
PCC
you.
Statement of Licensing Policy, page 9. If you go down to it, it will be under Hackney Carriage Vehicle Licence Condition. You've got the first paragraph, the second paragraph, and then it goes into 2, 1 in brackets, the above shall not apply to the following. Ignore the first paragraph. On the second one, it says any prior approved Portsmouth private hire operator signature permanent and not magnetic. Remove and not and put or. Then go to the next paragraph below, the local mandatory, and in brackets permanent and not magnetic. Remove that and put or. Then turn the page, and we go into, again, private hire vehicle licence condition, page 10. If you go to 2, so down from the 2, it'd be the fourth paragraph down, technically. So then go down to the second one in the italics, any prior approved Portsmouth operator signage, again, in brackets, permanent and not magnetic, remove and not and put or. If you go down to local mandatory, below that, again, remove "and not" and put "or." I can give it to you in a minute so you can see it, if you want, Chair.
My problem isn't this just the legislative...
This is our policy. This is our policy. I'm making an amendment to our policy. This is what we're discussing today, so we can discuss. We can change the
I thought we were going to
policy.
leave this to the end. I wanted questions right
But no, I'm proposing this now, so we can ask questions on it.
I'm seconding it now as well.
So I want it done. I'm quite happy to do this now.
Thanks. So, blimey, I was expecting this at the end, but yeah, if you want to try and make this amendment...
I'll do it now
we'll vote
because
on it
it's...
till the end.
Yeah, we'll vote on it at the end, but I'm going to do it now because it's then the trade reps...
If you have it completely in writing for the solicitor as well, please.
I can just give him the paper, he can see it.
Yeah.
This one was up to 2-1 second.
Second lot, yeah. Again, private hire operator signage, permanent and not.
Any signage can be permanent.
Basically, yeah, any signage can be permanent or magnetic. Not the fact that the actual drivers will have a choice. Wherever it says permanent and not magnetic, it's permanent or magnetic. I think that's where I'm going with it. So basically, on the private hire and on the Hackney, both paragraphs have been changed to "or." That's my recommendation, seconded by Councillor Lee Mason. And that is it. So page 9 and 10.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to my questions now, if I may, Chair.
Yeah.
Once I'm done, then I can shut up for half an hour, where everyone else speaks. So Appendix B, which is page 27 of the report pack, so you guys can see, it's paragraph 4. I'm going to start with the GMB, which I know is everyone's favourite subject today, by the sounds of it. Mr. Peters from the GMB states there's a considerable amount of cars working in Brighton, and therefore they have a right to discuss the matter. I'm going to ask the licensing manager, what evidence base do we have for this with regards to licensed drivers? Have we had representations from our counterparts in Brighton?
Indeed, we have, Councillor. We have had significant concerns raised by our colleagues in Brighton as to the amount of vehicles that are operating or taking work in Brighton. We have done joint enforcement work with our colleagues in Brighton because of the extent of the problem.
Okay.
And I can tell you, as late as this weekend just gone, one of my licensing colleagues was actually on a weekend break in Brighton and was surprised to see various Portsmouth vehicles driving around Brighton with working in Brighton.
How many cars are we talking about, Nikki, roughly, as an estimate? You must have a rough number.
I can't give you, and I wouldn't give you a number without having the evidential basis to do it, but it's significant enough for my colleagues in Brighton to make formal representations to us about their concerns. We have dealt with complaints because they get reported to us. I can give you that as an evidence.
So basically Brighton have the same issue that we have with Havant and Fareham cars driving in Portsmouth?
Well, we had one specific incident we had with a vehicle where we received a complaint was that a private hire driver deliberately obscured his operator signage so as that he couldn't be identified as to which company he was working for outside of the city.
I think there's points made in paragraph 11, which is more of a comment rather than a question, that our drivers generally misbehave outside their licence authorities. I get the picture that Mr. Peters is creating, but I actually think it's quite disrespectful to all our drivers, especially the fact that he has quite little knowledge of the situation in Portsmouth. And I think he should probably keep his nose out and keep his views into Brighton. That's my opinion, and that's a comment. I'm going to go to page 29 of the various reports back. There was various representations on Appendix C. Again, I think it's a point that Mr. Sutherland made regarding, have we contacted our counterparts in Havant, Fareham, and if so, why are they not shown in the appendix?
Members, this information was extracted from a request to all licensing authorities in England, Wales, Scotland, England and Wales. Some councils just did not reply and provide any additional comments other than the answers to the question they were asked. The reason why you've got additional comments in Appendix C is for those councils who felt it necessary to add further comments. So that's all it is. It's just a case they decided to offer comments, other councils didn't.
Basically, they just didn't respond to our requests.
They did respond to the FOI request, but they provided additional information which I have provided to you.
Okay. No, what I'm talking about is the ones I've named, Fareham and Havant, for example.
I have the spreadsheet where I can tell you what their responses are in terms of corporate livery, but I didn't think you'd want to hear a list of 200.
I have to admit, I wouldn't have liked to have heard the list, but the list actually in the report, it would have been helpful for the, I think for the representations to actually see who's responded and have a rough idea of where we're getting the numbers from. You know, I think the number's quite large, so it might have been helpful to have that. Maybe for the future reference, that's something that this committee should have.
I take on board the views of the committee, and if any further information is submitted, then I will provide as much in-depth information as the committee needs.
Thank you, Nikki. Page 34 of the report pack, it has 176 councils have a mandatory requirement for livery. 104 of these permit magnetic signage. That is a number of over 59%. I think that, again, is a significant number. Again, I would like to have had a rough breakdown, but I'm going to ask you if you could possibly give me that breakdown after this meeting so I can see it for myself.
I'm more than happy to send you the spreadsheet of that information. The emails as well have also been retained from the individual FOI requests.
I just want the spreadsheet. I don't want the emails.
Them as well.
I just want the spreadsheet. But that's I've got one more point, which is actually in the bulk of the report, and I'm going to mention, I wasn't going to, but it's the views of the police, which I've spoken to the chair about, and I've spoken to yourself, and I've had emails from our legal advisor today. The views of the police are interesting because firstly it admits the numbers are poor due to the amount of time of unreported crime, and then it contradicts itself in the first statement where it states that they do suffer from crime but it's largely unreported, so you can't provide evidence. There's quite a contradiction from the Portsmouth Police in itself. And also it makes quite a wide statement, so they can't provide the evidence but yet they can make an informed opinion, which I think is quite interesting. But also this is one officer stating his opinion, and it in no way represents a level of corporate responsibility from Hampshire's Constabulary. While that is made, this is from the Portsmouth neighbourhood inspector, so it does carry some weight to this committee today, but it's quite a contradictory statement that we've heard today, and many of the drivers are not reporting crime for the sheer fact that obviously insurance claims, they can't have the vehicle off the road, they haven't got time to do it, and I generally think it's just a conflicting statement because another officer and another authority could give us another opinion, and I think we should caveat that and be very mindful of that statement.
Certainly, Councillor, you will put such weight that you feel is necessary on the views of Portsmouth Police in considering the comments. I have to say that there's two elements of this, is that there is an element of comment in terms of the reports of crime and the underreported unreported crime in relation to vehicle damage, and it is unreasonable to expect the police to put in force any sort of measures if those crimes are not reported to them to be able to identify those risks. Unfortunately, in Portsmouth, priorities are to violent crime. Violent crime is the predominant factor in Portsmouth that occupies most of our police officers' time. That's not to say that vehicle crime is not as important, but it is dependent upon the taxi trade themselves to make that position, to phone 101, to say this crime is occurring, because then the police resources can then adapt to say what can we put in place to rectify that. If there's underreporting, then that isn't going to help with assisting drivers. The second part of the Portsmouth Police's comments, because it's his inspector speaking on behalf of Portsmouth Police, is looking at the issue of livery from a safeguarding and public side, irrespective of crime or not, is the issue of having corporate livery on vehicles of importance for public safety and for safeguarding, and you have a view put forward for consideration by Portsmouth Police that they do feel that it supports crime prevention, and it does allow potentially in some cases for crimes to be detected.
No, I fundamentally agree with what you're saying. I think it's just the way that it's come across in the report. It does contradict itself in the opening statement, which is unfortunate because it's their submission. So I'm just making that point, and I think you've eloquently put it quite well, actually, the point that I've made, and just rebutted it quite well, so I'm quite happy with that. And I know we've had ding-dong on email over this already, so thank you.
I'm glad I was able to clarify.
It took 2 days, but we've got there. Thanks for your time, Chair, and I will let somebody else speak.
Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you. Could I ask through you to Bruce, if we do come up with any change here, Aqua will enforce what they want to do. Will you be keeping the signage on your cars the same as it currently is?
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. So the question we've got in effect then is that the vast majority of cars on the roads in the city, private hire, are Aqua or Uber. So we are talking about what might be on the Uber cars. Can I ask, Nikki, you've said that in your proposal that where a driver works for more than one company, they'd be able to, or they would have to display both company signs. Does that mean that on page 10, in the private hire section, section 3, which is 2/3 of the way down the page, a proprietor shall only display on or from vehicle one set of approved signage as required? Is that about the company? Do we need to, if you're going to change and say that a driver who works for Uber or Aqua is going to have both, would we need to amend that bit as well? Or
I think in relation to if there was if they were working for another secondary operator, the purpose of that condition is saying you can't have an Aqua sticker on one side of the door and an operator sign on the other side of the door. It's got to be matching. So what you would have is a sign, the main sign of the main operator, and then if there was a secondary magnetic sign, that would go over the main operator sign, but would still only display one set of approved signage at any one time.
Okay.
We can fit.
I think if somebody's trading for two different companies, two platforms, having to swap signs over between jobs is really difficult, and you might just have to have two sets saying Aqua and Uber. Won't it happen? No. Okay. My other questions are around what Scott's proposing. As I understand it, and I think it's really important to listen to the views of the police in terms of public safety. They're the people whose job it is to do that. The proposal, as I understand it from Scott, is that the signs that are currently permanent on the outside of the car could be magnetic in future. Or could, but it could. So, because I think that means that the signage when the car is being driven would look exactly the same to members of the public. It's just how it's attached. So the issue that we've got, as I understand it from drivers, is that when the car is not being driven at night and is parked up, that makes it more of a target. Is the suggestion, Scott, through you, Chair, that at night people then take the magnetic ones off when not working? Because I think if we're going to do this, I think we've got to be quite careful about the wording of this to make sure that that's clear, that they could be removed when the vehicle is parked up and is not operating. Because I think that's the point of having magnetic ones, absolutely, that you can take them off.
I think fundamentally, if I may, Gerald, through yourself as the licensing manager, the plate would always be permanently affixed anyway. So the actual taxi plate would always be affixed to the vehicle. So it will always still be a taxi technically. So removing it or having it on the vehicle doesn't make a difference, because the plate is still there. But so it can still be identified.
Sorry, I need to be really, really clear about this. When it is operating and available for people to hire, the signage would be the same as is currently happening now, but a different way of affixing it. That's fine.
That's absolutely clear.
But the option of actually, and that's sensible. I think the only thing I would suggest, because personally I think that's a sensible way forward.
I knew you would.
Is that we did this for a year as an experiment to see what happens, so that we could decide with evidence in Portsmouth if it's a good idea or not a good idea, and review it after a year. Would be my suggestion to try to make.
I'm happy to subsume that in, Chair.
Just refer you over to Nikki.
Members, I don't propose that that is an acceptable compromise. We have had, when we first introduced signage, we did have magnetic signage. Why you have gone over to permanent is because the council, yourselves, have learned by those previous mistakes. We didn't just decide to do this. It was because we were having problem with magnetics. They were being stolen. If you are local people, you know that the Portsmouth crest has a lot of different other connotations towards a football club, and there were a lot of thefts because probably a lot of people had the Portsmouth crest on their fridges. So there were thefts. They were having problems on the main roads in coming off of the vehicles, and I'm sure Chris and Viv will agree with me, because they've been in the business as long as I have, that we were having a problem with magnetics being removed from the vehicle. We can't get the overriding, and I'm sure Ben will give you some legal advice, but a private hire vehicle or a hackney carriage vehicle does not change its status whether it's working or not. It is always a licensed vehicle. The plate will always be on the vehicle. There is commercial advertising. A lot of drivers use commercial advertising on their vehicles to gain revenue for other, to promote companies in Portsmouth. Those will still be on the vehicle. You will also have potential windscreen stickers. All of those signages will still be there. Take advice from people that actually work the industry. We do not see that removal of that signage, and we have thought about this, is going to offer the amount of crime reduction that drivers expect, and it is a licensed vehicle and signage mustn't be removed from it. Do you want to give further advice?
I don't think I really need to give much further advice other than to just endorse that viewpoint. Vehicles do remain licensed at all times, whether they're hackney carriage or private hire vehicles, and conditions continue to apply at all times also. They can only ever be driven by licensed drivers. It's in fact is a criminal offence for somebody that's not a licensed driver to drive either vehicle.
Councillor Symes.
The magnetic signs trial. How long ago was that?
This, I can... They were still, we had colour photographs, didn't we, Viv? It was at the time where there was a collaborative partnership in the City Council called the Taxi Quality Partnership, and the whole emphasis and importance of livery on licensed vehicles came about because hackney carriage vehicles, and to an extent private hire vehicles, wanted to use bus lanes as a more effective way of getting around the city. And that brought about the implementation of a livery so that vehicles could be clearly identified from private vehicles, and also that they could use bus lanes through the livery on the vehicle. I'm thinking, I could refer to my policy, but 10 years longer? 97.
November 01 was a bus lane.
So I'd like to suggest that was such a long time ago, and the way the whole service is applied now is so far different from then.
But in respect, members, if we've had that policy in place since 1997 and we haven't had problems with livery and crime, it doesn't sound to me that there is an issue directly arising from that livery. Had that been the case, there would have been, I suggest, more evidence that vehicles were being targeted because they had livery on a long time before now.
Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Okay.
There was a suggestion I thought was a really helpful suggestion. If we are going to move to looking at magnetic ones, the suggestion was made about having reg numbers on, which seemed remarkably good idea. Would that be possible? And B, because that means that they're non-transferable or more difficult. And I thought it was a very, very sensible suggestion. Secondly, can I ask, are the City Council licensing department the only people who can make signs, which would seem to be very... if we're going to go down the route of doing the magnetic ones, one of the issues that might be around is people saying, well, I've lost them or whatever, and therefore having some level of control over who could produce them seems sensible, A, so people don't produce lots of them, but also so that we can tell if they're being lost or stolen or whatever. So if we're going to go down this route, I would suggest that the City Council Licensing Department are the only people who could produce magnetic signs, so that we're able to keep a record of issuing them or how it goes, so that we can see if things are going wrong.
The council in terms of the corporate livery, issue them directly. We're not responsible for operator signage at all. So the corporate livery we get from our suppliers. The only issue that I can advise you of is that the stickers are pre-ordered in a certain format. It may well be it would be something we could look at. It could be something, but again, my view to you is that we can do that with registration number, but not magnetic.
Any other questions, members? No?
And I really am sorry to keep harbouring this on, but we are looking at a vehicle, a licensed vehicle. We want those vehicles to be clear and available to the community, that they've got a reassurance that they're getting into a licensed vehicle. If you have a magnetic sign, that sign can be removed. It can be removed. It can be removed, and that will. There are other areas local to this council where corporate livery or any livery is not required. I think it will cause more concern or more problems for those more vulnerable in our community if a vehicle goes along, takes a job where there's no security of livery on that vehicle, that drivers can take that livery off to work other areas. It has happened, and we can evidence that. And we should be offering security to members of the public, that we are eliminating that risk. And that's why, for corporate livery, there is no reason why it needs to be magnetic, because it is a licensed vehicle, and it should retain that status by permanent fixture. If operators want to have magnetic, so they can put them on depending on who they're working for, we've said that that can be managed through the proposal put forward. But to have corporate livery that can be removed from a vehicle, we think would add to problems and at risk public safety.
Councillor Symes, were you suggesting asking another question?
Yes, I was. Yeah. As in most cases, I'd like you to bear me out on this, when I phone a taxi, I get sent the taxi driver's number from the company I'm hiring it for. Surely that validates that person turning up in that car, whether they have livery on it or not.
Can I ask...
Please,
Can I ask Mr Hall to address that issue for you, because as an operator he will take bookings, and I'm under the understanding that only a third of jobs that they receive are via an app, and that a third. Would you mind if you asked?
On the bookings that we do, on the bookings that Aqua Cars do, a third are done by app. which means 2/3 are by other means, which most of the time is by mobile phones.
Would you get a message back from?
Okay? No, you don't. Sorry, no, you don't. If I order, sorry, you're wrong. If I order a taxi from my mobile phone outside a club when I've had three or four beers, half drunk, okay, I would just say, I have a taxi now, thank you, bang. It won't send me a message to turn around and say your taxi's outside. It would just send me a card. And then if a car turns up with no stickers on the side and that lot, are you expecting me, half drunk, to walk round the back and go, oh, that's my car? That's a proper taxi. Sorry, what about girls that come out, half pissed? They walk out, stay across the streets, get into an unmarked car. Who's responsible? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. It's happened in Portsmouth. It's happened in Portsmouth in Guildhall. It happened in Portsmouth. Sorry.
Councillor Vernon Jackson, make sure it's a question,
yes,
yeah?
Through you, Chair, would you not agree that the suggestion is that there be no difference in the markings of cars while they're working at all? So nobody coming out of a club should see any difference. It's just the way in which a sign is affixed during that period. So can I ask, could I propose an amendment to the suggestion that Councillor Scott Peter Harris has put forward, is where in any of his suggestions where the word magnetic is, that we add the word including reg number. And Hannah has said, and that there should be a review after a year to see how it's working.
Thank you for that. Is that seconded by anyone?
I'm happy with that, Chair.
Any one of those three? Just clarify with solicitor so he knows we've got it.
Just basically that it shall include the word or reference to the registration of the vehicle after magnetic.
Can I just assist the committee in terms of the logistics with this? We have just renewed all of the private hire licences. For us to...
Please, Councillor Mason, can Nikki finish? Thanks.
There will be cost implications to the trade in replacing all of the signage that currently exists on the vehicles. And we will need timescales, obviously, to source a supplier of signage in the agreed format of this committee and get those distributed. So a 12-month time of review potentially needs to be a bit longer, so as perhaps members can give some thought as to how we're going to distribute the printing time for design, for printing and for distribution of all these stickers, and that there will obviously be a cost implication to that.
Councillor Mason.
Where the changes say or, it means or. So people, if they're happy with the current stickers, they can stick with them. If they want to change them, they can change them. So we're not talking about having to do all new again now. So the ones that are on use are still legal and valid.
Could I suggest if you wanted the licence plate numbers, they all have to have it and not just certain ones, because then you can still swap and you still won't be able to guide who has the right cars and who doesn't
But
at that
if it's
point.
magnetic, we're putting the veg on. If it's not magnetic, it'll be the same as it is because it's stuck on.
Then it's pretty superfluous and it wouldn't matter.
Members, I would suggest you potentially will have a problem of some vehicles that will have signage that won't give their registration number, and then some vehicles that will have their registration number. I would have imagined that uniformity and consistency is a better approach in terms of identification of licensed vehicles. If you want vehicle registration numbers on vehicles, that can be achieved. But I would suggest to you that it should be all vehicles and not just some and not others.
Councillor Harris, Peter Harris, sorry.
There's also an alternative suggestion here where obviously instead of having registration number we can actually have basically effectively the number that's on the back of the licence plate. So we could actually have that number. So for example, if your taxi number 894, that could be on the sign, so it's actually on the side of the vehicle still.
Members, that is
No,
what it is.
that's what I'm saying. I mean, alternatively,
You could retain
we could just retain that, because
and the
there is that
conditions as they are.
alternative there. But I don't see the issue that we're coming to about the registration. I actually think if you're removing it, you know, if it's a removable magnetic signage and then it's placed back on there, it's actually quite easy to identify that is actually one of our vehicles. A lot of people will just take down the reg, for example, if they're doing it via an app. It's quite simple. I mean, Bruce has put a very good point about 1/3 of his users, shall I say users, is probably the best term, customers, sorry, punters, whatever you want to call them, Bruce, they go through the app, and obviously Uber's solely through the app. And as we're moving towards app-based technology, people don't actually look at the plate number, they look at the registration. And I think the registration is actually key to this argument.
Councillor Vernon Jackson.
I just think, if we're going to look at it after a year...
I guess we've moved on to comments now, yeah?
I think probably, yeah. If we're going to look at this after a year, then doing so on the basis that we've seen, do we need to have reg numbers for everybody, the permanent ones or not? My view would be to suck it and see what. If Aqua have already said that they're not going to do this, this is just going to apply to Uber or a few others, so it's not going to be a vast number, and it gives us the ability to see if we can meet the concerns raised by some drivers in a way, and it's, nobody should notice a difference while a car is working. This is, all we're doing is talking about what happens when a car is parked at night unused, and that's it. And if we're able to help a bit, that would seem to me a good thing to do.
Councillor Leo Mazen.
Thank you. I have to say, Chair, that I came here today with an open mind, and I'm a bit concerned about the heatedness of the discussion that take place, and a bit of abuse of officers at the top table, I have to say. So I just think that we should quieten down a bit and actually decide what is best for the public. Because really that's our paramount concern, and it's stressed here in all the papers that we have in front of us. And I listened very carefully, and I thank the deputations, because I think they were very good and came up with different aspects of it. I can only say, if I call a taxi and I go out into the street, I get into a taxi because I recognise it as a taxi, right? Other bits, whether stickable bits on or stickable not on, I wouldn't know. It looks like a taxi to me. I've had a note somewhere, you're absolutely right to say it'll be there in 5 minutes, be there in 10 minutes, or whatever. I think what impressed me, could I just go back to, just for a technical point, to the point that Councillor Peter Harris made earlier on, and that's in relation to the written deputation from the police. Because I'm not convinced it is from the police, and I just want to make sure in future that when we're putting headings on things, good luck to him, and he obviously knows what he's talking about, but he does say, somewhere in the back, that it's his own personal opinion. He does say that. So I think in future we might, and I'm not bothered with it being in the report, but it should say this is the opinion of Inspector Joe Bloggs or whatever, rather than the police one, because as Councillor Peter Harris says, you had to go through it to find out that in fact it was his own opinion. Based on lots of good things, no doubt, but nevertheless, it's his opinion. So I think we should have said opinion of, rather than the police, the opinion from the police. I think the thing that impresses me on the report, when I went through it, was the Crown Court case with Basingstoke. And it's interesting, the conclusion of the judge, that it could have gone either way. Because they look at and I'm not going through all the bullet points, but the risk of magnetic signage coming off the vehicle in windy conditions or falling off the vehicle. Well, yeah, there is a risk. There's also a risk of people pulling it off the vehicle. So, that is a risk which they identified. Now, the other bits go to deal with the driver. Drivers forgetting to put the signage back on the vehicle. Vehicles without signage being in contravention of the licence conditions, increased resources and whatever. Let's go to the increased resource in a minute. I think those two with the drivers, if we decided magnetic, it's the driver's responsibility. Yeah. That's whose responsibility it is. And I've no doubt that if and when some of these do come in, members of the public will actually report back that they've seen vehicles without signage or whatever, right? Increase resources to monitor and ensure compliance. I think that's an important point that you've made, and I think you need to come back, because you've made a point, Vic, you need to go back to see what in fact that means in relation to time for officers and clearly money involved. I think, as I remember, the licensing in relation to the taxi trade is not for profit. Yeah, so it's got to balance itself out in some way for that. And the risk to the public. And I say the risk to the public seems to me to be fairly minimal to that extent. And we've all dealt with cases of taxi drivers held up in front of us who've been an absolute menace to the public. That's the risk, they can't be monitored by everybody, but suddenly when members of the public complain, they do come to us and we sit and listen to them. So I think on the logistics actually of how this could come into operation, if that's what members want, needs to be worked out. Nikki, you're absolutely right. You just can't go back and suddenly from next week start implementing this. So I think we've got to be reasonable as a committee if we're going to do it. I can't see if that's what people want, that's what people want, as long as something coming up to pick me and my family up looks like a taxi. Right? Because I'm sure if you get into the real world conspiracy theories, people can actually livery themselves, can't they, and pretend to be, and take my 50p or whatever it is off me. That I haven't used a taxi for a while. It's still 50p, isn't it? So the logistics would need to be worked out, I think, in relation to this one. And in fact, I think it's also fair for the licensing officers and Ben to look at it, and if needs be, come back and say it can't be done. Okay, I think that's a fair point, because I don't know. So I came here just to listen to what was said today, and and there are arguments on both sides of the equation. But I think I would agree with the recommendations. If we put it that way, there could be some magnetic plates on some vehicles if that's what people want. But I do think that I don't know whether a review of a year or whatever, right? But I think I'd be interested, say, if I was here in a year's time, to know how many drivers had been done, or whatever the word is, for failure to display their magnetic bits. So I think I'd go along with that, but I just be concerned that it's just not simply saying do it and then it happens. There will be a time involved in it. And I do appreciate the way this report coming forward, and I think it's very comprehensive, so thank you for that.
Any other comments, members? Councillor Field.
I just wanted to really echo what Councillor Madden was saying. I believe that it's down to the individual responsibilities of the driver to make sure that the signage is in place, but at the same time we need to make sure that we're addressing both the public and the driver's representatives. The situation is obviously, like Councillor Madden said, there's going to be a logistic period. We need to look into the feasibility of it before we suddenly snap our finger and it can happen. But at the same time, if we're talking about reviewing it a year, maybe carried on a bit further, 18 months to 2 years. I think that would be a more reasonable period to work around.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you much. We wait a while for the comments. We're not suggesting removing any signage whatsoever, so your concerns about a car pulling up outside having no signage is going to be no more found in the future than it is at the moment. At the moment you can have other cross-border trading coming in without signage picking someone up. If they're operating under our legislation, they will have to display a sign, whether it is a permanent or magnetic. If the driver chooses to take the risk of having a magnetic, he is aware that if he loses a magnetic, he cannot trade until he has replaced it. Therefore, it's his risk. He has a choice of either permanent. We're not forcing either one's hand to go one way or the other. So they can have permanent there if they want. They can have a mixture of permanent for the mandatory and magnetic for the operator. There's no requirement for the operator to have to be signed. It's just if there is one, it has to be shown. So they're still going to have signage. We will still have cross-border hirings coming in without signage, and this is going to be the same as it is at the moment. Just Portsmouth ones will have to have the signage on when they're working. It's not going to be much different from the moment. Some people might choose to stick with the stickers. That's their choice. I also had concerns which Leo raised about where it says the Portsmouth Police view. Portsmouth Police ceased to exist in '67. It's been the Hampshire Constabulary since then. And Hampshire Constabulary, there are many districts in Hampshire that do have magnetic signage. In fact, 59% of the country use magnetic signage. Therefore, it's not something that we're testing that is completely unheard of. I think it will work. You do have magnetic signs from the past on the filing cabinets in the office. So we've still got examples there where we have used magnetic in the past. Magnets have come on, the signage has come on. If people want to pay to make the choice and change, I think that's fairly appropriate. And I don't see it really differs policy. It's just bringing in a system that allows operators to make the choice if they feel safer at home that they won't have their vehicles broken into. We're not saying they can take off the plate, we're not saying they can ignore any of the other legislation. All the legislation will be the same. The difference is that at the end of a shift they can either remove the magnetic signage or they keep it on. And I think it's a rather simple thing that gives people a choice.
Councillor Hayter-Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say, Councillor Madden, as ever, in licensing you make some very good points to this committee, and especially when I'm on a subcommittee.
Chair, I reject that.
I suspect on the subcommittee side of it as well, I've spent probably subcommittees with everyone here actually on drivers that misbehave, and quite often they are going down. I mean, that is happening. I think that the issues you made around the court case were quite sensible points. That court case was in 2007, we're now in 2020, so we're 13 years removed from that court case, and I think with 59% of magnetic livery being used on vehicles in the sample that we've got is quite important. And I think moving forward, the trade itself has had a lot of knocks in the last few years. We've put additional things on them such as CCTV, which they've had to obviously pay out for in advance. It's a lot tougher out there than it was 10 years ago. It's not a full-time job, I think, for a lot of these guys now. And I think we need to be seen to be trying to aid them in getting more custom. And I think this might actually help in the longer term.
Thank you. So if Councillor Vernon Jackson wants to make a comment before...
Just quickly to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to give my apologies and go in a minute because I've got to be somewhere else. But there's just...
Well, you both wanted to do an amendment and an amendment of an amendment, so
yeah.
if you wanted to come together and decide what your amendment is.
Yeah, so I think that... I think that the other thing I would suggest, if it's possible, is if this does go through, could we have a report at our next meeting about the implementation, just to progress this on if this is the way in which we're going.
Members, you have, as part of your policy in terms of livery, provided 2 officers delegate authority for the design of the livery. So we have that delegation at the moment. The reason why that hasn't been progressed so far is obviously because of the concerns that have been raised by the trade. What I could propose for your consideration is that because that delegation is there, officers can look at the design of signage, corporate signage, that is magnetic or is permanent, with, if you feel that's appropriate, the vehicle registration on it, or any other demands or recommendations that come out of this committee. But you have given us delegation to prepare that livery.
I think Councillor Vernon Jackson is happy if we went for the actual vehicle number.
No, sorry, in that case I misheard. No, I think it's magnetic, you need to keep reg number.
Yeah,
because then you can't swap it round.
Okay, yeah.
Which is the point made in the declaration.
I think we're both happy to allow that, accept it, have a year's review. But I think at the next meeting in March, not the next meeting next year.
Would it be helpful to suggest that it's 12 months from when the signage is available?
Yeah, I think implementation period, Nikki, would make sense. From when the implementation period comes in, then the 12 months starts from there.
So then, if there is no other comments, I'd like to move to the vote proposed by Councillor Peter Harrison, seconded by Councillor Mason.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, we need to be clear what we're voting on.
Yeah.
We need. Can I actually know what the amendment is? It's deletions, isn't it? And putting in or, but I think we need to do that.
It's deletion of and not between permanent and magnetic. Yes, paragraphs 2, 1 And again, over the page 2.1, under paragraph 3.6 of the licensing policy. And then, in addition, the words including registration after magnetic at those points as well. So it reads permanent or magnetic including registration.
Members, can we be clear, just so to avoid any confusion with the trade, that until such time as that magnetic signage has been prepared with the registration numbers, that there is no changes to the existing signage until the new arrangements come into place?
I think Viv might have a question.
So just to clarify, so permanent stickers, you'll just have your plate number on, magnetic stickers, you'll have your registration on. Is that correct?
That is the recommendation in front of us.
So members, you want two types of livery on licensed vehicles?
If a driver is going to, it'll look almost exactly the same, except if somebody is choosing to have a magnetic as opposed and to take them off, that to make sure that they can't be swapped around with somebody else, that they've got the reg number, so there's an easy way of checking. So it's the reg number, and it'll look almost exactly the same.
Members, could I...
At which point, I'm sorry, I'm going to abandon you.
Through Bruce. I heard that. I think that's quite a valid point. Bruce, reiterate that, sorry.
So, what's going to stop your cars, Portsmouth cars, operating in other areas without these stickers on? Because you're licensing these vehicles, okay? You're going to put magnetics on them, and you're hoping they're going to work in Portsmouth and the surrounding area. What's going to stop them from getting out of the car, taking the stickers off the car, put them in the boot, and buggering off to Brighton? Nothing. And what's the difference between having a number plate on one set of cars and no number plates on another set of cars? We're having double standards going on here. It's crazy. And on the councillor, on the end.
Hector Harris, just call me Councillor. Just call me Scott. It's fine.
You said about it will help drivers getting more income, or sort of like...
I said make life easier.
And hopefully get more customers for the drivers of Portsmouth, which I want.
I agree.
I really agree with that. But the biggest problem all these people here have, and if they don't agree with me, I don't know what planet they're on, is the out-of-town cars with no livery, no CCTV, coming in, working. How are you going to stop it?
I fundamentally don't disagree with you, Bruce, to be fair, and you can't stop it. That is the reality. I know. It's fundamentally not to do with what we're talking about today, but fundamentally you can't stop it. Hence why we've read today that we have Portsmouth cars in Brighton, hence what I've put that out there already. So
take the stickers off, Scott.
Well, no, the point you're making is we've already got cars in Brighton working anyway who have got livery on. So the fact that they're there already anyway, it's not going to change the situation that we're in, you know.
So will this committee then allow me to plate all my cars and get all my drivers to plate them and badge them in Wolverhampton, which is only 59 quid for a badge? I do not need a plate. I do not need a MOT. I only need an MOT. I do not need CCTV. Okay?
It's fundamentally what we're asking
Wolverhampton
is
have
not to
just
commit it.
issued 15,000 plates. 15,000! And they're not working in Wolverhampton. They're working in Birmingham, Coventry, all over the place.
Yeah,
and if that's the best way to go, then I think we ought to do it.
I think you're talking about the Deregulation Act more than anything, Bruce.
And stickers as well.
I think you're more getting to about the Deregulation Act, which is what we're not here for today. And I think if you want to have the representations about the Deregulation Act, you should contact your local MP. I mean, no, but I'm being fundamentally honest with you, because the Deregulation Act is a national government thing. It's not to do with local authorities, you know. So if you really feel that strongly about the Deregulation Act, Bruce, I think you should contact your local MP. I mean, who is the MP in your area? Here, who's your MP where Aqua's based?
Aqua's based. Don't know.
Portsmouth South, Stephen Morgan. Chat to George Fielding and Tom Coles at the end, they'll link you up.
Nikki.
Can I ask the committee again, and I'd recommend as your reporting officer, that if you're going to have a livery, that it is consistent whether it's a magnetic or whether it's adhesive, that you have a simple standard for one standard for all vehicles, whether that signage is magnetic or whether it's vinyl.
I know Joe's left now, but I think the feel of it is we're going to have a year's review. We can decide at that point. He's saying it will be the same design, except where at the moment you might have 426, instead you'll have CRG 894V, for example. So that will be the small change at the moment, but in a year's time, I think it would be wise to make the two liveries the same. But that can be done
if the trade were happy, as you're getting that positive for that decision to be considered by the committee now, as opposed to a year's time, if the trade are happy that there is a consistent signage across the city, would the committee consider doing that as making that part of their decision today, that the signage will be an agreed?
I don't think we can have a full agreement from, because some have said that we've already heard that some groups won't change their livery and they don't want to go to the cost of having to change their livery, so I don't think we want to try and force it through. I think more a case of those that want to have the change magnetic. It will.
It won't, 'cause with the greatest respect, the large number of private hire vehicles in the city are aquacons.
Members, I'm considering when we get change of vehicles, we get car-to-car transfers that happen on a regular basis, so we will be changing signage on a regular basis throughout a licensing year. The situation you're saying is that my staff will say, if you want adhesive, you're going to get this design. If you want magnetic, you're going to get this design. Rather than saying, what sticker do you want, adhesive or magnetic? Here's a common standard.
If you're suggesting it's just for those going forward new changes, I think that's a good idea, but I don't think we can force everyone to change the ones that are there at the moment. So any new ones, I think we'll be happy.
Nikki, I think we're going over the logistics of it, which is what we said we'll bring to the next meeting. I think we're getting too much into how we're going to do it. I think that is down to what you're going to bring back to us. Because you might come back to us and say, I'm sorry, but this fundamentally we can't do it like this.
I thought you were making a decision
We are making a decision today, but we're talking about at the next...
And another in a review in a year's time?
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. Fundamentally, you have, I'm quite happy for the delegated authority to be, because you might come back to me and say, actually, Scott, this is going to look terrible, can we fundamentally bring it back? Because that might happen. So I think we're getting into the nitty-gritty.
I just need to be clear that the committee are guiding me under delegated powers to design a new livery of magnetic, which encompasses the registration number for private hire and Hackney carriage vehicles. Is that what the committee are asking me to do?
With the greatest respect, Nikki, you will have that power under delegated powers, and as you know, we'll go via MIS, and if we don't like it, we will call it in. It's that simple.
And I don't mean to be obtuse at all, members, but I want to be really clear that the recommendations and the decision you're making is implemented correctly by the licensing authority. So that's why I'm asking, and if we can get that agreed, then I'm sure members will want that meeting to finish and agree and vote on it.
Could I just say that, I think it's
Yes,
fair,
you can.
Thank you. It's fairly obvious that at the moment, people have paid, one company in particular has paid for all their liveried vehicles. They have no intention of changing it. They own an enormous number of cars that work in this city. I think it will penalise them to make them take all that signage off and put new signage on with
all due respect,
numbers
you're
on.
penalising them because they're saying they don't want it changed in the first instance and you're going to change it then. So you might as well just go the whole hog because we want conformity
We're giving them
within
choice.
the council.
We're giving them
Quite
choice.
frankly, I'm disappointed at the amendments made today because it is a matter of public safety. I have plenty of anecdotal evidence myself. My mother, who is severely dyslexic, does not use an app on her phone. She uses Aqua to get hold and she fucking goes, sorry, apologies for the swearing, but she goes outside and she sees, she relies on seeing the sign on the outside. Oh, it's shocking. Is it shocking? We all swear in this room. Bruce said a swear word earlier and we let it go. But really, we are making decisions here where our officers are becoming confused and we need to clarify. I am calling a 20-minute break. Thank you very much.
You still have the signs.
20-minute break. Go for a cigarette, everyone. Thank you very much.
So we don't want, the committee doesn't want a break, Chair. We just want to get this over with.
We're happy to vote.
I'm not happy to vote right now. I'd quite like a break. Thank you.
It's fundamentally in the Chair's gift.
And I did apologise for swearing. We'll re-adjourn at 6:10. Thank you. If everyone could take their seats, thank you. Thank you for the 20-minute break. I'd just like to relay my apologies, and especially to my children who are watching at home on the stream as well. Unfortunately, things can get a little bit emotive, and I apologise for my actions, but after a 20-minute break, I have calmed down. I'd like to ask councillors, members, over the signage about the, as an amendment, I know that you just want on certain things about the licence plate number. I'd ask it for there to be uniformity, and I think Nikki would agree with me on that basis as well.
Thank you, Chair. With the greatest respect, we're going to decline that on the basis of the amendment already put forward, with another caveat at the end of it to say that we require an update on the implementation of the policy at the next meeting in March 2020, along with a report. I spoke to the licence manager outside the meeting, and the legal advisory, they're quite happy with that explanation.
Thank you. I then move to, if Ben would like to explain the change in policy, you're happy to move to a vote on the amendment of the policy.
Well, effectively it's being brought back in a month's time for the meeting. That's what the proposal is actually putting forward. And currently the
the implementation of the logistics of how it's done will come back in a month's time. The policy will change today.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm asking for the implementation in a month's time to come back, to give Nikki enough time to work the logistics. Yes, that is the clarity that I'm seeking. No, the recommendation is surely full, because the recommendation is to stay the same.
I think what we're saying is that until we get all the logistics in place for you, we can't move to implement that new policy. What I'm thinking is that you're saying today we are going to change our policy to this, and we will want a report back next month to update us how you're going to do it.
100% correct, Nikki. Thank you.
Councillor Madden.
Sorry, I was just I'm still not sure what I'm actually voting on. I think it's important that we vote that day. But all I think I am doing is on number 3 of the recommendations is and council signage on vehicles to allow magnetic signage. Yeah. I think, so no amendments come out and that goes in somehow or other. I think, but when the next meeting takes place, I don't think we can't dictate that. The minutes will not say that members ask for a meeting to take place in March, because something may well happen. Okay, in the meantime. So I think that's all. The minutes will say that. People will raise merry hell if it doesn't happen, but I don't think because we can't. I don't know when you actually sit down to work out the logistics of it, whether in fact you'll be able to do that, because it's not too far away in March. So I would say that would be in the minutes. Okay, and sometime more. I'm not too happy, personally, having meetings in March, and I did stop them when I was here at the council, because they can tend to become political, that's all I'm concerned about. And you know, the nearer you get to the election, the nearer you get to Purda, right? But if people think that it needs to come back next year, the only time then it could come back is after Purda, which would be in the new municipal year. So
we changed policy in Purda last year. We changed policy in Purda last year.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, over the age of vehicles.
Well, the chief exec was wrong then to allow that.
I have to admit, you made the point that we did change policy during Purda last time, and I was uncomfortable then, and I would be uncomfortable again now if we were to do that. But we're changing policy now, you know, so we're asking for a report back. It's quite simple, it's just a report back. It's not asking for anything different. I think the licensing manager is quite clear in that, what I've asked for.
Yes, I am, yeah.
Then I'll propose, no, I won't propose an amendment. The amendment proposed by Councillor Pater Harris and seconded by Councillor Mason. All those in favour of doing as proposed through that, yeah.
Sorry, Chair. I think we need from the top table what the amendment is.
Ben.
Well, my understanding is that the brackets at paragraph 2, subparagraph 1, under the Hackney Carriage Vehicle Licence Condition.
No, sorry, that's not what I want.
Okay.
There are 3 recommendations. Yeah. I want to know what the amendment is to recommendation 3. What I propose all we need to do is to take out no from amendments, to make amendments to its current policy, and then at the end to allow magnetic signage. I think it's that simple, Ben, rather than go through the different... So that when it's done then, all the bits that say and or whatever will come out. Is that okay, Ben? So I think that 1, 2 stand as they are, and 3 is just amended to say that there are amendments to allow magnetic signage. Does that cover it? Or is it too simple?
Councillor Field.
With respect, Councillor Madden, you're not actually changing the policy by doing that. All you're doing is changing the recommendation, and the policy is stated in 3.6. You'd have to amend it there in order to amend the policy.
No. If you look what 3 says, 3 relates to the licensing policy.
The import of that is that you're determining to make a determination.
Well, what I would say is that the committee are making an amendments to its current statement of licensing policy, and the amendments made should be stated afterwards in the minutes at the next meeting. It's quite simple. But no, we are making a change in licensing policy, because as I've just said, if you change the recommendation to the fact that we are making an amendment, and then you list the amendment that we're making, you clearly, it's an amendment to policy. You know. Thank you, George.
Nikki.
I'm going to try and have a stab at it, that we are going to say in the current policy that we are just going to say any prior approved Portsmouth private hire operator signage, and that would be, operator signage can be permanent or magnetic. Any corporate livery can be permanent or magnetic, and we will make those changes to those policies, to each of those policy sections that says the signage, whether it's operator or whether it is corporate, can be either permanent or magnetic.
It's in there, but Ben's got it written down, don't worry.
Yeah.
I would like you to read it in full, please. Thank you, Ben.
Okay. Fair enough. So, as Nikki started to read out, any prior approved private hire operator signage, brackets, can be, and that's Nikki's wording rather than the proposed wording, but permanent or magnetic, including registration, close brackets. And the same follows the following point: the local mandatory, brackets, permanent or magnetic, including registration, close brackets, display of the council's corporate livery. And then over the page at paragraph 2.1, the second bullet point, any prior approved Portsmouth operator signage, brackets, permanent or magnetic, including registration, close brackets, and then on the next bullet point amended, the local mandatory brackets, permanent or magnetic, including registration, close brackets. Those are the proposed amendments to the conditions.
Nikki.
I'm really sorry, members. I think that the changes to the permanent or magnetic and number plate, the registration number, relates to the corporate livery only and not the company's, not the operator signage. So we'll only change the reference to refer to registration number on the corporate livery.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's sensible.
Are we comfortable with that, members, to vote on that amendment?
And does that include with the report coming back at the next meeting, which hopefully is March 2020, but I take Councillor Madden's view? It'd be in the minutes, yeah, but is that, I'm quite comfortable that's going to be in there. I'm looking at the Officer on Democratic Services. Thank you.
I would hope so, but with the report on taxi, on the, it just must be maybe minuted that the officers do work really hard and to get reports out, and it's taken quite a while for this to come here. We would have liked it to have come sooner, so you need to bear in mind that I think that the officers would try and get it out for March 2020, definitely.
Absolutely, Chair, I totally agree.
Who's all in favour? That has passed. I think that we can still put through the recommendations because we've changed the policy, so that we could still put through the recommendations because they are still being followed, as it were.
I'm looking at the standing order body over the road there, who would know.
Between Ben, if we've changed the policy, then that has changed, then we could surely vote on that. But Ben, do you know what I'm getting at?
Not entirely sure what you're driving at. No, the recommendations have been were amended to amend the wording of the conditions set out in the report.
So we voted, it's done.
And that decision's been made.
Okay, thank you. So then that's it. See you next month. Bye.